Hi, my name is Doug Smith. I work on the wolf program as well as birds and elk. And I've been here since 1994, the year before wolves were reintroduced in 1995, 96, and 97. So we are finishing the 25th anniversary of wolf reintroduction. So a memorable and milestone year. We have a book coming out this month, November, summarizing the whole last 25 years. So what I'm going to do today is just give you the highlights of the last year. And the last year was a big year. We had a real big increase in our wolf population. It was a bumper crop of pups, but it was also a COVID year. And so this made it special from the human side of things. Wolves were unaffected, but we learned less about them because some of our normal activities like flying didn't occur. But this is one of our old famous wolves. This is 471, a female from the agate pack. She's been dead about 10, 12 years. Rare white colored wolf. But I'm going to talk a lot more about things like this on my talk, how we study them. This is a wolf collar that's been chewed off, but this has been our bread and butter, catching and marking wolves. We are over 550 captures of about 450 different individuals. It's one of the leading wolf studies in the world because of that. And Yellowstone is one of the best places worldwide to view wolves. So this is one of our issues, both pro and con. It's great that people see wolves, but it also requires quite a bit of management and oversight that people see them without bothering each other and bothering the wolves, because after all, this is a national park. So I'm going to talk about mostly the last year, but this was a special year in that it was 25 years of wolves in Yellowstone after being gone about 70. Last wolf killed 1926. So here we go with the PowerPoint. Hello. Hello again. Doug Smith here after the introduction in the field and hoping to give you an update at the end of 2020 on Yellowstone wolves. Perhaps the best place to get the update is our newly released book, at least out in December 2020, Yellowstone Wolves, Science and Discovery in the World's First National Park, which goal was to summarize the last 25 years of wolves and elk and everything that happened. So whatever I don't say in this talk today is coming out in that book. So not to plug the book, but it was a 6-year effort involving 74 contributors, which is over half the world's wolf biologists. Many people from the Yellowstone Wolf Project are graduate students. And so I encourage you to take a look at this book. We subsidized the printing to keep it to be affordable, and we pitched it to a general audience. So most of what you should know about the first 25 years is in this book. And so this was the 25th anniversary of Wolves to Yellowstone. So a big deal. This is January 1995, the wolves coming through the gate. This was a historic moment. Yellowstone was established in 1872, was in the midst of predator control with wolves at the top of the list. The last wolf was killed in 1926, the last cougar sometimes in the 1930s. So essentially, the 20th century was a carnivore-less century, and this had deep reaching impacts over the entire ecosystem, and I'll get into that as the rest of my talk develops. But we've had negative attitudes for predators for a long time, and in fact, in many ways, we still do. This is a coyote, but you get the idea. In Yellowstone, 1930s, but people did not like predators. There were good animals and bad animals, and predators were bad. So that was early Park Service philosophy. So Yellowstone 1872 preceded the National Park Service, which came about in 1916. And even after the National Park Service and the Organic Act, our enabling legislation, was established, there really wasn't a clear idea of what parks were for other than scenery. That was the low-hanging fruit. That's the land no one wanted. So that's what we turned into national parks. Things like ecosystems, the word wasn't even coined until the 1930s, but ecosystem functioning, top-down control, which was predator-driven, bottom-up, which is plant-driven, none of those things were really thought of as useful purposes for the park. But for this story, predators were early targets of animals to get rid of. And this is still ongoing. This is a photo from a couple years ago east of Yellowstone. So these early attitudes are still in place. And this is one reason we wrote the book. And I think this is an important reason why we restored to wolves back to Yellowstone, because is this really the right attitude to have, to completely eliminate another species? And this attitude was so ingrained that arguably one of our greatest presidents, certainly the greatest conservation president, Theodore Roosevelt, referred to wolves as the beasts of waste and desolation. And I spent an afternoon in my office in Yellowstone with his great-grandson. And I just had to ask, would TR still hold that view? And he said no. TR's views as a conservationist would have evolved. He was a big hunter. The understanding of predators at the turn of the last century was elementary, not deep. And he said TR would have adapted with our science, with our growing understanding, with our changing attitudes and ethics. And so this is an important thing to consider, given one of our greatest presidents said this. But to give you an idea of what these attitudes did to wolves, this is the historic range of the gray wolf. The eastern United States had wolves, but that was a different species called the red wolf. I won't get into that, but essentially, because wolf taxonomy is complicated and debated, but essentially, North America was occupied by wolves. You can see Yellowstone there in the red rectangle. And this is what it was like at its low ebb. So after several centuries of killing, wolves pretty much retracted to only the remote regions of North America, which was primarily Canada and Alaska, although there was a remnant population in Minnesota, not depicted here, but the population in Wisconsin and Upper Peninsula Michigan went out in the 1960s. And the last stronghold in the lower 48 of about 400 wolves was in northern Minnesota. So why this problem? Well, wolves kill. This is a photo that we've got to confront head on. This is what wolves do. They kill, and we want to be the killers. We are big game hunters. We are ranchers. We raise livestock. And these are things wolves interfere with. So we've got to understand this, and we've got to deal with this in a very forward-thinking fashion. But wolves also are symbolic of many things, and they represent wilderness and wildness. And here we have the world's first national park, but one of the keepers of the wild, or the symbol of the wilderness, was gone. And really, is it preservation of nature to eliminate some species and to pick the other ones that, well, they're convenient for us to have and we like them and we don't cause problems? Is this really nature preservation? Is this really with the mission and goals of the National Park Service? What is a true wilderness like without all the native constituents? And so Yellowstone, when wolves were listed in 1974 as an endangered species, the Endangered Species Act came about in 1973, the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, anchored by Yellowstone National Park, was an immediate first choice. Arguably one of the most intact and largest temperate zone ecosystems in the world. Now keep in mind that's not the Arctic or the tropics, but around the middle part of the earth where all the people live, Yellowstone is one of the largest. So it was the Yellowstone ecosystem. So it was an obvious choice. And so in 1995, 96, 97, we released 41 wolves in Yellowstone National Park, and they spread from the park to the surrounding area. And now we have roughly 300 to 350 wolves in that green area. About 125 live in the park itself. And this was designed to be a plan for the entire Northern Rockies. In other words, the Yellowstone ecosystem We had a sister project in central Idaho where 35 wolves were released in 1995 and 1996. And then in northwest Montana, wolves established themselves through natural immigration from Canada. So the idea was 3 populations of wolves called metapopulations. Those areas show connectivity. That was a required aspect for the population. And then hopefully the populations would blend together into one northern Rocky Mountain population. And that has occurred. There's about 2,000 wolves in the tri-state area now, and wolves have actually immigrated into Oregon and Washington, and occasionally wolves crop up in California. Wolves from Wyoming have made it to Colorado, but they have not sustained themselves, usually because of human-caused mortality. We chose reintroduction, and in the book, we had someone write an essay who was against reintroduction, Diane Boyd. Her mentor, Bob Ream, who passed away a couple years ago, did not favor restoration through reintroduction. They did favor restoration, but they favored it through natural recolonization, like what happened in northwest Montana, where they were working because they felt that it reduced animosity. Many people thought Yellowstone ecosystem was too isolated. In many ways, it functions like an island, and the wolves just would not make it back on their own. It's surrounded by a sea of people. And what's kind of happening in Colorado, wolves can't establish themselves piecemeal, one at a time, one pack at a time, because people knock them off. And so most favored reintroduction, not all. Diane wrote her view in our book. So what happened? We did not grow more wolf habitat. In fact, the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, human population is growing, development is increasing, people want to live next to nature. So how did we get an animal back that does best in the absence of humans, that does best and needs a lot of space? Mindset, cultural norms, human attitudes. It used to be everyone didn't like wolves, now just half the people don't like wolves. And we've learned about them. We've talked with our friends about them. We've told accurate stories about them. We feel that having all nature and all species present is better than picking and choosing the ones that just we want. The other thing that's interesting, especially in this day and age, it was a bipartisan effort. Both Republicans and Democrats through many administrations worked together to get this done. And in this day and age, that's a remarkable achievement. So wolves can help us solve some of societal ills. So here's one of the first wolves brought back to the park. This is female number 7. I've seen this photo many times. It's been published before. Wouldn't you like to know what she's thinking? But she was a pup at the time. She'd come from Alberta, January 1995. One of the first wolves to come back. She went on to form the Leopold Pack, named after Aldo Leopold, who recommended wolf reintroduction to Yellowstone in 1944, a key wolf in the recovery story. We had to haul the shipping containers, wolf cages, using horse-drawn sleighs. This is Wally Wines, Bob Blackwell, and Mark, our veterinarian, on the way to the pen. This is the first wolf coming in. This is Bruce Babbitt in the blue. This is Molly Beatty in the brown, who sadly passed away 2 years after this photo was taken. And to commemorate her efforts, she held strong despite much political opposition. We named a pack after her, Molly's Pack. They live in Pelican Valley. It would have been a great name for a pack too, the Pelican Valley Pack, but we named it after Molly. They started as the Crystal Creek Pack, and that's our longest extant pack going today, Molly's Pack, commemorated after her bringing that first wolf in. There's the beginning of Yellowstone's new wolf era. This is the Nez Perce Pen in central Yellowstone, where we also conducted several releases. And this is handling wolves inside the pen. This is me in my more limber, fit days, but occasionally we had to catch a wolf, administer vaccines, health checks for injuries, and sometimes to collar or recollar. But Yellowstone was not always pristine. Again, as I said at the beginning, national parks, they didn't have a rich rationale for establishing them for ecological baselines or ecological integrity. They were mainly set aside for scenic beauty, and so people wanted to use them. Who would allow this nowadays? But back in the day when everything was a howling wilderness, why not? Parks were for fun. Parks were for enjoyment, your leisure and pleasure. And so our Yellowstone has a history of ecological disturbance. Because the carnivores were gone, the elk population needed to be controlled. And from 1923 to 1968, about 77,000 elk were removed, either by the Park Service, by killing, or hunters in the state of Montana hunting them as they left the park, or being shipped from Gardner. There was a train station in Gardner out to, I think, over 20 different states, Canada and Mexico, to repopulate depopulated game ranges because of market hunting. So Yellowstone helped repopulate elk across the western North America landscape after a lot of the elk were killed off. But with no carnivores, and even despite this culling, the elk still had strong impacts on the vegetation, primarily woody vegetation. I'm not going to talk about grasses. That's a different story, and that's largely that heavy grazing by elk increased the productivity of grasses, but for the woody vegetation, it suppresses productivity. And for most of the 20th century, willow, aspen, and cottonwood were suppressed and not growing, and this is an example of that. Return of the wolf, return of the cougar, and this began to change. You can see the willow here coming back, but what's key is the beaver pond, which raises the water table, which creates a positive feedback cycle. Beavers, because of willow, are able to establish ponds, which establish more water, which establish more willow. And so the return of the beavers were largely gone from the middle part of the 20th century. There were transients documented, but when I did the first beaver survey in 1996, there was one beaver colony on the entire northern range. Now there's over 15, and they came back because there's something to eat now in the form primarily of willow. When you get the willow back, you get the structure that the shrubs provide, and you get birds back, particularly the two birds on the one on the right, the willow flycatcher, the one below, the Wilson's warbler, are both willow obligates and have increased in recent times. The yellowthroat there at the top left is more of a willow generalist. But you can see here two age classes of aspen, one very young, one very old, and nothing in between. And this is that middle part of the 20th century that was taken out by heavy browsing. So how'd the wolves do? You can see that this is divided into, and we just eyeball this on the Wolf Project, kind of two different periods. The first period of rapid increase with 3 declines, 99, 05, and 2008. The first 2 declines, after 99 and 2005, the population came right back up. After the 2008 decline, it didn't, suggesting another limiting factor. Those first 2, all 3 declines were due to canine distemper, and then we've kind of had a flat period the last 12 or so years, although numbers are going to be up this year oddly. Our 12-year average is about 100, and right now we're looking early winter to be about 125 wolves, largely due to 3 very large packs. Junction at over 30 wolves, 8 Mile over 20, Wapiti over 20. So just in 3 packs, we have almost half the population that we've had the previous 12 years. So a big year. We'll see if that goes the whole winter. This is the configuration of territories at the end of last year. We haven't made our new territory map for this year. We wait to the end of the year. But this is 9 packs right now. I believe we have 11 packs in the park. We have a new pack shoehorned in between Junction and Phantom Lake called the Carnelian Lake Pack. And we also have 2 packs in southern Yellowstone, Pahaska Pack, although Wyoming will probably count that pack, but a new pack called the Heart Lake Pack. And as of now, they were in the park in the summer, but they've pulled out for the winter too, but we will likely count them. The Beckler Pack is alive and well, but there's no collars in that pack. And this is an improper graphic to show because it's too much to absorb in one slide, but this is a lot of data. This is in the book so you can study it, but this is 25 years of wolf pack territories, and you can see how land use has evolved over time, how there are areas that are consistently used by wolves and areas that are not. And that southern portion of the park was heavily used during our first 15 or so years. It still is, but less so, largely because that country is very hard to make a living in the winter. But one of the reasons for our success, one reason we can write a book about it, is because we have handled over 450 different individual wolves, over 550 captures, and some people are against this. A national park wildlife should be left alone, but we've done this because this is one of the greatest scientific opportunities ever to study wolves. All the wolves were collared when they were released, and because of the controversy, if we don't have the information, people will make stories up. They'll just make the data up. This is the history of wolves. This is what people do really well at. And so what we want to do is provide accurate facts, and then we can debate what to do and what our management action should be. And so this is handling a wolf. We're going to do this December 14th, 2020 for the week, but this is one of the things that we do to help us learn about the population. Capture them, measure them, get blood so we can understand disease dynamics, genetics. We have a full pedigree of the wolves in the park, and mark them so we can follow them. This is the story of the elk population. You can see at the end of the 1960s on the left, the elk population hovered around 4,000 to 6,000 elk. The last year the elk were controlled was 1968. The population shot up. We reintroduced wolves around 95, 96, and the populations declined. Many people say that's due to wolves, but we also had a recovery of cougars, we had a recovery of bears, and the state was managing for fewer elk as well. Here's what the wolf population has done. That's what the elk population has done. And this is what the bison population has done. In many ways, we've reached kind of an equilibrium, the red line and the blue line between wolves and elk. But one thing that's happened is the bison have increased. When I arrived in Yellowstone in 1994, there were 500 bison on the northern range. Now there's over 3,000. So in many ways, the first 25 years of the book really tells a wolf-elk story. The next 25 might be a wolf-bison story. We're in the middle of what we call our wolf winter study now. Now it's scaled down because of COVID, but this shows the frequency at which wolves kill, and you can see that early winter is always lower than late winter. The red bars versus the green bars, because elk are more vulnerable in late winter because the winter has worn them down. And this is a consistent pattern that we see through all studies. But we also have bears, and people should remember that this is a restoration of the entire carnivore community. Yellowstone is probably as predator rich right now than it's been in its entire history. We've had wolves come back, cougars come back, grizzly bears have increased, we have black bears, we have coyotes, outside the park there are humans. This is carnivore rich country. So one thing that we're trying to do is have a consortium of 5 national parks: Yellowstone Grand Teton, Denali National Park in Alaska, Yukon-Charlie National Preserve, and Voyageurs National Park in Minnesota. And we're looking at the impacts of hunting wolves outside of the park on wolves living inside the park. We're writing this up now, but our job is to preserve nature, and we want to see how good of a job we're doing. This is the number of wolves harvested on the different boundaries in Yellowstone as of a couple of years ago. You can see our north boundaries where most of the wolves are taken. The other boundaries are more wilderness boundaries, so not as many people, fewer wolves are taken. Most of them are taken on that north boundary. And here's Denali. It's a longer data period. Their data set goes back to the 1980s, but they've had 170 wolves harvested in 31 seasons. But hunting is very much part of the picture. A lot of people think that it increases social tolerance. So to have wolves, you need to hunt them. Also, killing livestock, killing wolves quickly is an important feature to having wolves back. A lot of people leave out the importance of this to people. In fact, I was one of those people. I felt very strongly for ethics. Do we have the right to completely wipe out another species? And for ecology, this messed up the ecosystem. But now I think one of the biggest reasons to restore wolves is for people. These are Native Americans praying for the wolves on their return. These two people on the right have come back every year since 1995 to pray for the wolves. And wolves are a sensation to visitors. Yellowstone's the best place in the world to view free-ranging wolves. One day I'm out on a flight. I was having a hard time tracking the wolves. I look down and there's a crowd. And so this really has been a sensation. It's brought in $35 million a year of economic activity. So this has been a real benefit to people. Not always. This is a habituated wolf that stole someone's tripod. The person chased the wolf down to get a very expensive tripod and was given a ticket. But this is because people were approaching these wolves as pups. And they got used to people, and so we had to haze them to be wary of people. So the regulation is to be 100 yards from wolves at all times, and this kind of behavior will not develop. And so I've spent my life trying to put a number on wolves, and I've learned that the best way to communicate with people is through a story. So I ride into outfitters camps in the fall to tell stories about wolves. They tell my stories, but it's a great way of outreach. But who wouldn't want to know her story? This is a picture of a wolf in the northeast quadrant of the park taken on a remote camera. Who cannot want to know what those eyes could tell? And so what has been the value of Yellowstone wolves? Worldwide recognition. Yellowstone gets a lot of headlines. Long-term research is very, very rare, and it really is the key to understanding nature. And really, nature preservation is our most urgent goal nowadays, and wolves have had a restorative effect on Yellowstone. What have we learned in 25 years? There are elk still out there. In fact, we estimate the elk herd as about 6,000 to 8,000 elk. Many people said the elk would be wiped out. They are smaller, below carrying capacity, and this is probably the long-term ecological balance that occurred before humans started meddling with ecosystems. It's also a natural predator-prey system, which is rare in North America. We have seen what bringing the top-down influences of wolves back means, and so now it's no longer a completely bottom-up ecosystem regulation. And this has had major scientific attention. There have been hundreds of papers published on wolves and other impacts to the system. And it's very important to remember that Yellowstone may be as pristine as it's ever been, because Yellowstone has a long history of human disturbance and change brought about because the early ideas of what parks should be about. And we've learned more about wolves because we can see them here and follow them than probably any other study in the world. What have we learned about wolves and humans? Wolves are not a human safety threat, but they may become habituated. It's a great connection with nature, something real, and we crave things real, and it's best wolf viewing worldwide. And so people have paid attention and come, and it's had huge economic impacts on the park. So we need to embrace this. We need to care for this, and we need to talk about it. So the story is in the eyes, and maybe Adolph Murray, who published this photo in the frontispiece of his book, knew this better than before. The mountains are a part of me. I am fellow to the trees. Robert Service.